purpose of this video is to show you how simple it is to actually repair one of these Hozelock timers. This particular timer is not that old. I've probably had it just over a year. Last year I found that I couldn't program it properly. These two buttons here didn't work particularly well. I used to have to press them really hard and then they perhaps would work. I've overwintered it, so I took it off, kept it in the house and took the batteries out. This year when I went to use it, I found that again it's very difficult to program, and within about a week it packed up completely. When I opened the back up, I found there had been water ingress, and the water ingress wasn't rainwater. It was obviously coming from a leak inside the unit itself. This whole area was a total mess. The batteries were corroded and there was a lot of brown gunge in the bottom here. And I suspect what happens is once you get water in there, you get some sort of electrolytic reaction with the sleeve of the battery, which are normally they're sleeved in like a very thin steel case. So you get an electrolytic reaction, which is rust, which causes rust. So that's what the brown is. So it was a total mess. So I cleaned the unit out. So cleaned all this area out and dried it. But the leak itself actually comes from the front compartment. So we'll actually have a look at that and see how we can fairly simply repair this. If we go to the front, we see there are two grooves in the case here. If you put a knife on the second of those grooves, this one here, and you just apply it slightly like that, ease it like that, you'll find that it should actually come adrift. I think this unit is actually just stuck on with some sort of water resistant glue, so it is purely an adhesive, which is not that strong in terms of being able to open it up. Once you open it up, you have two halves. One half has got the mechanical, the little clockwork mechanism in it, which rotates a ball valve, and the other is a printed circuit board. So let's look at the printed circuit board first and see how we can improve the way that the electrics operate. Quite simple to do. We undo this small plug here, and then we find there are 5 screws. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we undo those screws, we can then remove the printed circuit board. I've removed the 5 small screws here, and now the printed circuit board has come away from the front panel. You can see in the front panel here there are 4 little pads which correspond to these 4 buttons, and these 4 pads I think are a carbon impregnated rubber, because they press down on these 4 little sensors that you may see quite shiny now, and that shorts them out, and that's how you get the signals to the printed circuit board. So it's essential that you clean those up, and also clean this circular contact pad here. I use just some sort of car scratch release polish, but something that's a fairly fine polish, just to polish that up, and as you can see really now they are very shiny indeed. And then what I did is I put a very light smear of silicone grease. Don't use Vaseline or lithium grease, because they're petroleum based. You really want to use silicone grease, and that equally applies to greasing up the O-ring, which you'll see later. So that's basically the small electronic circuit, nicely cleaned up. Make sure these pins here are also cleaned up, You see it's all very nice and clean inside now, and then we can put that back, and what you'll find is that probably worked very well now. This is the small little sounder that fits in the corner that's running a bit loose at the moment. So we'll put that back. Goes in that way. The little sounder goes in the corner. I stuck a little piece of gaffer tape just to hold it in place. Originally there was a sort of a hard compound there to keep it in place, but gaffer tape would certainly do fine. And then we just need to, well, put the screws in before we put the gaffer tape over. So we can screw that back in place. And the water shouldn't have affected the printed circuit board unless it's been left for a long period of time. You'll find that printed circuit boards are normally covered with a lacquer. You can see on this side it's been lacquered over, and in fact you'll find that the individual components won't be harmed by the water that's inside, but it has to be perfectly dry. Okay, so I've now screwed up the printed circuit board and it's all back in place. Just I should have mentioned that these four little buttons here on the underside where it makes contact with the printed circuit board, it's worth just giving them a wipe over, making sure they're nice and clean as well, because they're obviously quite critical in terms of the use of these buttons. Okay, that's the electronic part done. Now let's look at the mechanical part, and this is where the problem arises with the leakage. First thing is there's one screw here, so we can undo that screw. And then if you turn it over, you'll see there's two small black lugs that poke through. There's one there and there's one there. And if we can push those lugs over, takes a little bit of a push to do it, maybe a screwdriver might help, just to push them over. That's one gone. And there's your other location lug. Having released those two lugs, you'll find this all comes out. So that's the main guts of it. And in fact what you'll find is there's obviously a clockwork mechanism that runs off the small motor here. Be careful with the motor. I found I wasn't particularly careful and this small lead broke off, which was quite difficult to solder on. You have to scrape away the nylon because there's a small contact area that actually disappears into the nylon, so I had to scrape that away to actually get the solder to melt on and fix the wire. Anyway, that aside, this is the mechanism. So the motor goes round, it gears down and it turns this small spindle here, and this small spindle goes into there. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this, but if you can see that, you'll see there's two small lugs and that rotates a ball valve. So the valve that actually turns the water on and off is just a simple ball valve, and that rotates the ball valve. Let's have a little bit deeper into how this ball valve works and everything. So what you see here, there's a clip. Okay, if we can actually undo that clip, and pull that clip out. Okay, this whole lot pushes in like that. You'll find there's a spring and there's also another O-ring that's down here. It's all covered in a nice load of silicone grease. Okay. Down further there's a diaphragm, and beneath that there is the ball valve. So let's see if we can pull that up as well. See if we can price that out with something. So I've prized the little ball valve out with a mount that it rotates on, just so that you can see how the thing functions. You don't necessarily have to take it apart, this part. You'll probably find that all that will be needed is an O-ring, which I'll show you later. But this is how the thing functions. So the ball valve actually locates on the end of that little spindle there. There's two small lugs that it fits on. There we go. And then the motor just turns that round. And that's how it works. Now the real problem is this little O-ring, because it can, although it's contained within the body of this, it does seem to let a little bit of water by. So if it's worn, that's what happens. The water gets in through that O-ring and then gets into the front body of the timer. What I would suggest you do is buy a new O-ring, and I'll give you details of that, but actually put two O-rings in. There is enough room there to get two O-rings in, and that really makes it very secure. Okay, so there's a second O-ring here which I've got, so I will put two O-rings in when I finally reassemble it. So I'll now reassemble this bit. A little bit fiddly to do, because one has to drop that down and locate it properly inside. So I won't bother you too much with that. I'll show you once I've put it all back. So I've managed to locate the ball valve back in its place. The next thing is to put this diaphragm in, which can be pushed down onto the ball valve. And then there's a spring that goes in there to actually push the diaphragm onto the ball valve. Put the spring in there, and then we just need to put this bit back on top. Pushes down like that. Give it a bit more of a push. That's better. That's gone right in now, and then we can put the clip back in place, which holds that assembly in place. That's it. Right, okay. So as I say, you don't really need to do that if you're just replacing the O-rings, but I thought I'd do that to show you how that actually works. Okay. So now we've put the two O-rings on. There's one already on there. Put the other O-ring on. Need to make sure that these two lugs correspond to the position, or those two lugs there correspond to the position of the grooves in this small spindle. If you look at the moment, they're at right angles. So I just need to turn the ball valve round. So I just need the screwdriver probably just to shift it round. Okay, I've rotated the two lugs so they are now horizontal, and when I put this back you'll see that the two grooves there are horizontal as well. So push the two battery contact blades through there, through those two openings there, and we can now push this back into place. It needs a good hard push to relocate the two lugs that we took off. So you heard that go, that's located it nice and solid, and you'll see that the two lugs now are located on the back. So that's going to hold that spindle nice and tight against the two O-rings. The two O-rings, by the way, you should coat with a little bit of silicone grease. So now just screw that up. Nice and tight. All nice and tight inside there. Clip the electronic or the printed circuit board. Two small lugs this side which locate it. So we push those in there. Like that. We just need to put some adhesive around here, waterproof adhesive. Maybe silicone rubber would be a good idea, I think, to actually seal it off and then let it set so it's actually waterproof. So we can seal that up. The lugs here are just guide lugs, they don't actually clip or anything. So we can put that in there like that. Or if you want to check it out, put a bit of gaffer tape round initially. Make sure that everything is, you can open it up again and then see it's all dry inside. Having done that, it's just a case then of putting your batteries in, which we'll do. And hey presto, we're in business. So hopefully this will help you. It'll save you a few bob. I think it's just a bit frustrating that these things do leak, because when I thought about just buying a replacement, I looked at all the reviews on practically all the timers that there are available, and all of them seem to suffer from leaks at one time or another. The only thing you've got to worry about is if it actually fails with it in the on position and you start using, thousands of litres of water. Anyway, hopefully this helps. Thank you.